Hi guys, this is Amit Tandon. I'm a stand-up comedian and you're listening to me on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Amit, thank you so much for joining us on and starting your day appropriately with Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My pleasure.
I've been learning a little bit more about you, about your work. And so I obviously Googled you and clicked on one of your videos. And of course, the first thing that pops up as one of the online pop-ups was online orders for Indian food and real estate in an Indian neighborhood in Pleasanton, which is a neighborhood close to mine. So when you are someone who's analyzing your work and you're seeing yourself online, I'm wondering if what the likely keywords are for Amit Tandon when you do a Google search.
I've stopped stressing about it because there are so many Amits and there are so many Amit Tandons. Beyond a point, I've given up. There's a singer, Amit Tandon, who was born in US but lives in India. Indian Idol,
Yeah.
he was there in Indian Idol. And then, in fact, he moved to the same house that we lived in
My
for
goodness.
one
Yeah.
year. In Mumbai when we moved in. We lived in in an apartment. And we moved out, he moved to the same apartment.
Huh.
And I can't
Okay.
tell you the number of times he's got the queries that were for comedy.
Yeah. Well, if
Uh,
you had to put your own keywords on yourself, I mean, what do you think when people are looking for you? What do you think those
huh.
keywords probably are that the algorithm is finding out about when we're looking for Amit Tandon, the comedian?
Then it has to be Amit Tandon comedy or Amit Tandon comedian. Then only you reach me. But otherwise, I think even the Wikipedia page that comes out is wrong. So
Right.
my people have picked up my profile from Wikipedia and said that I was born in New York, whereas I was
Ah,
born in
that's
in India. So
I suppose you could just make up an alternate Wikipedia page for yourself
yeah.
and have fun with that. I'm sure.
I'll try that. But I have a Wikipedia page, I think, but it never pops up, I think, because the other Amit Tandon, his Wikipedia page has been around for a longer time. So
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
kind of
Well,
given up on her.
yeah. I mean, and does it matter anymore in that way? I mean, you're not somebody who's just starting out, and so I mean, do you still Google yourself? Do you find that that exercise is of any value?
No, I don't. I don't.
Mm. How do you
That's
feel about that now compared to when you were first starting out?
Now I'm more, sure of myself because earlier, when you're new, you want to do every show, don't want to miss out on queries. So that's why you are
Yeah.
nervous that, maybe people will land up somewhere else. Will they find me or not? But now I'm kind of very comfortable in my space because now, I know if really somebody wants to find me out, they will.
Yeah. Hopefully, again, Amit Tandon, the comedian, and not the other imposters that are out there. So much of comedy and comic
Yep,
art that is resonating
yep,
and matching to an audience is because it's relatable, and
yep.
that relatability is so critical. And so, is for you so far, has there been a secret to not just the relatability, but to staying relevantly relatable?
Mhm. I What I do is that I try to stay. There are actually two parts to answer to this question. So, one is the art form being relatable, and the other is content being relatable.
Mm,
Okay, so when it comes to the art form, I think you will stay. It's not relatable. It's actually relevant. You stay relevant in your art form if you keep on evolving. If you
mm.
keep on adding something to your skill set rather than just doing what you were doing 10 years ago. And that's also more fun for me as a person. What I try to do is that every year I try to add something new to the way I perform or the kind of content that I do. Okay. So that's the part that keeps you, relevant. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if I do the same sets that I was doing 10 years ago, people will log off. They won't listen
Mm,
to me.
right.
Okay. And when it comes to relatable, that's the content part. Again, there in stand up comedy, how I look at it is that you can't be dishonest. Okay.
Mm,
You've got to stay honest with your material. Okay.
yeah.
Whenever you are writing, put the audience first.
Mm. Almost
Okay.
have an empathy for the audience.
Yeah, you should not think that this is what the market needs or things like that.
Right.
Okay. You can't start catering to a market. You should do material which you think, you know is what is bothering you, what comes to your mind. And
Right.
you'll be surprised a lot how many times people will find it way more relatable than when you try to cater to a market. So the more honest your material is in comedy, I strongly believe it works much better than trying to write material for a particular market. Okay, I'll write for young people, I'll write for
Right.
older people, I'll write for these people. People like middle class jokes, so let me write middle class jokes. No, that's
Yeah.
not how it works for me.
You mentioned the word honest there
Yeah,
and honesty in there,
yeah.
right? And then you also mentioned the word bothering. And
Yeah.
so when it comes to that honesty, is it something that you have to toggle between something that tickles people versus something that
Mm-hmm.
bothers them? And
Ah.
is that something that you have to analyze pretty frequently and reflect upon that, particularly after each show, after each tour that you do?
Mhm. So the funniest bits are the ones that come from things that are that are pain for people. So
Yeah.
how people define comedy is tragedy plus timing is comedy.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
So whenever you will pick up a pain point and talk about it, people will laugh about it.
Sure. Again,
Okay.
because it's relatable.
Yeah, it's very relatable. You're picking up an issue that bothers them as well. So if you look at most of the sets that I write, and it's one of the techniques in comedy also in writing, that when you don't find a topic to write about, just think about all the things that bothered you in the last 15 days, and you'll
Mm.
find enough topics, and it will be very relatable.
Yeah, I'm sure that people could write volumes on things that
Hmm.
have bothered them in the last 15 days for sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I mean, in the same way that you just mentioned trying to write and trying
Yeah.
to observe and staying honest and
Hmm.
thinking about what's bothered you or perhaps an audience member, over the years now, you've had a front row seat to what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I'm
Hmm.
curious, have you become maybe a better listener and a better observer of your audiences, such to the point that that has allowed you to continually perfect the craft and almost work on testing things out a little bit easier, or has that stayed the same over 10, 12 years?
Not of the audience. I have become a keener observer of life as such. Okay.
Mm, yeah,
Uh, yes, I know a few things about what people laugh at and what people don't, but nobody can say, no comedian in the world can say that they know everything about what will work and what will not. That's
sure,
why we still do trial shows. Whenever we write a new show, first we do trial shows where we try out and material and see what people will laugh at and what people will not.
yeah,
Sometimes what you think is a premise is what people find more funny than the punch itself.
mm,
So I would not say that I know what audience will laugh at completely all the time, but I've become a keener observer of life as such wherever I am, whether I'm at home, whether I'm having my cup of coffee, whether I'm sitting with my friends, or I'm at the airport. I'm now more aware of how everybody around me is behaving.
mm.
That
now,
has
now
definitely changed.
as someone who is gracefully aging at the same
Mhm.
time, are you more aware are you more aware of all that's going around you because you are a comedian, or simply this is the part of life that you've gotten better at? Meaning that like everything
Hmm.
around you, you're
Yeah.
listening and observing for, because that's potentially, something for you to translate into
Hmm.
a written joke or a bit in your next act.
Yeah, so it's more because I'm a comedian.
Mm,
Because as a comedian now, your brain is 24 hours at work looking
right.
for new material. Is there something interesting? Is there a joke that I can do around this?
Yeah.
So it's because of the my profession more than my age.
You have, let's say you make this keen observation, it tickles you to no end, or it maybe
Hmm.
bothers you to no end.
Hmm.
And, as someone who is really storytelling with your jokes,
Hmm.
and you're crafting and weaving a
Hmm.
story in front of of your audiences, for those jokes or stories that you find absolutely hilarious, but they
Hmm.
don't necessarily seem to land with others,
Hmm.
um, are they just doomed to just stay in your head and continue to tickle you that way, or is there a place for them down the road someplace?
So there's a saying in comedy that there is nothing that's a bad set. It's an underwritten set.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah,
So sometimes I have a very funny thought. I think it's very funny, but I'm not able to communicate because I've not written it well as yet. Okay.
sure,
So I'll go back, to the drawing board and try to find a better way of communicating it, because then I think that, maybe I still don't know how to tell this story. I'm not
yeah,
setting it up right. My premise is not right. My beginning is not set, or middle is not set. So I keep it in a bank and come back, revisit, and see how I can. Because there are sets that just sit in my mind for an year and a half, 2 years, because I don't find the right way of communicating them. I
sure,
take them on stage and I find out that no, it's not working as yet, because I'm not finding the right way of telling it.
yeah,
There is definitely something in it, but I'm not finding the right way of saying.
yeah. Well, does that take practice for you? I mean, is that somewhat different now that you're a little more seasoned in your career? Have you had to
Yeah,
think a little bit about that? And I imagine that sometimes maybe somebody who's not as seasoned as this
yeah.
would tell a joke or have a story that they think is incredibly funny. It doesn't land in front
Hmm.
of an audience, and then
Hmm.
they immediately regret that instead of thinking
Yeah.
about it as a growth opportunity.
Yeah, now it's better. Yes, with years you realize there are ways of communicating a joke. Like I would try to use nostalgia. I'll try to see if I can put a story around it. It could be a great observation, but as an observation, it's not working. But let me just weave it into a story and see if it sits with that. Maybe add another character who can say this rather than it coming from me. So that's another thing that happens. I'm talking a little technical, but uh,
That's okay.
so sometimes, for example, you want to say a line, but if you say it, it might sound a little rude. So you add a character to your story who says it, and then it becomes funny.
Right. Third person.
Okay. Yeah. Add a third person and make it funny. So a lot of those tools with time you develop. So it becomes much easier, I think.
For someone who has that very analytical mind,
Mhm.
that's somewhat easier of a job when you're simply riffing or up on a stage alone, or you're
Mhm.
writing as a solo artist.
Mhm.
And yet, does that change at all? Does the calculus change when you're collaborating, when you're actually having conversation with somebody else? I mean, with
Yeah.
three or four of your friends, and you're
Mhm.
trying to manufacture something that's funny, because automatically I'm sure that there are lots of people around you who just come up to you and expect everything to be 100% hilarious all the time, when life doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So one, I don't riff too much on stage,
Yeah.
because I try to write my material first and take it on stage. Very
Mm,
few lines I'll add. With friends, yes. Now my friends know that they can't expect me to be funny all the time.
right.
Unless I'm trying new sets with them.
Yeah.
So that happens that, whenever I write a set, then I would test it. I'll call up a couple of my friends and try it with them and see how much they laugh, and then take it to stage.
Does that somehow, certainly it creates an iterative way for
Mhm.
something to be successful. Do you ever
Mhm.
miss sometimes just the spontaneity of being someone who can riff and just improv your way through some time up on a stage or even with some of your friends?
I think what I miss sometimes is the time when I was taking, risk in front of unknown audience.
Yeah.
That's the time that I miss, because now every time I get on stage, people know who I am. So one, it becomes a little tougher to take, a new set on stage,
Mm,
because even when I'm going to an open mic and then they announce my name, then there are 50 people who are like, oh, okay, okay, so it's Amit, so it must be very funny.
right.
Which,
Right.
when you're doing a new set, you're not supposed to be funny all the time. You will die on stage. Okay.
Yeah.
I think as you become more of a known name, the more you become popular, dying on stage becomes tougher.
Yeah.
So that's something that I miss from my, earlier days, when I could just go on stage completely fearless. 50 people, nobody knows my name.
Right.
It was tougher to build your credibility, because you have to build your credibility in the first 1 minute every time you got on stage.
Well, do you have to then fight off some complacency or even like the plateau of
Yeah.
not being in a place where you're constantly taking risks and you're really kind of pushing boundaries?
Yeah. So you got to be more conscious. So now, what I have to do is I go to open mics, I try my material. Sometimes it will fail, sometimes it will not. So I force myself to do that.
Yeah.
And second, as a comedian, you can't play safe ever. Okay, because
Mm,
every year and a half I have to write a new show. I have to write a new 1.5 hours. Okay,
right.
which, when you are an open micer or when you are new in the scene, you can probably write half an hour of material and it will work for you for 5 years. But now I can't do that. So
Right.
the profession is designed in such a way that even when you are very successful, you have to take risk. So now, what I do is that, I my process has changed. Now I normally would try to write a complete 1.5 hour show, and then take it on stage, with trial audience of 20 people, 30 people. The smaller the number, the tougher it is,
Sure.
which people don't understand sometimes. People might think that, addressing 1,000 people is challenge. But doing the same set for 10 people is
Yeah.
a much bigger challenge,
Oh,
because
sure.
in 1,000 people, there's always a momentum of 200 people who find you funny.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
200 people who will always be laughing. But in 10 people, okay,
There's a
in fact,
chance of
last time when
deafening
I,
silence, right?
absolutely, and you can
Yeah.
see every face now.
Yeah.
Okay, when there are 10 people, you can see every face from the stage, you can see every expression, and there can be complete silence a number of times. And that's where your material is really tested. Huh.
How much does your wife keep you honest and not complacent in this exercise? Because at some point, I
Hmm.
imagine that the people who know you the best are the ones
Hmm.
who are both helping you stay away from being complacent and also giving you the opportunity to take the most risk.
Yeah, so she ensures that I stay grounded. That way,
Right.
she'll always give feedback. Whenever I bounce off some jokes, she'll tell me that whether it's funny or not. That way, she's honest. And but that's true for your audience also.
Sure.
People will laugh out of pressure for first 5 7 minutes, but after that, you have to really work hard, especially in
Yeah.
a small crowd.
I wanted to ask you one thing. Every single culture, it doesn't matter where you are, what time or what generation. I mean, every culture, every generation has comedians and artists that are pushing limits and maybe overstepping in that particular moment.
Hmm.
And Ranveer Alabadia and
Hmm.
certainly
Hmm.
Kuna Kumra,
Hmm. Hmm.
recently kind of fit that
Yeah.
maybe a little bit. But are you someone who tends to be governed by any boundaries or guardrails, whether those are self-imposed or even the ones that you see are kind of current with the temperature of the times, or
Mhm.
even the temperature of your audiences out there?
Yeah. So one guardrail that was self-imposed long time back, was that I I did clean comedy because even when I started doing comedy, I already had a family. I was living with my parents, and
Sure.
we had kids. So I was used to watching my language at home. Okay, and for the first 1 year when I started doing comedy, I was doing all kinds of jokes because that was the atmosphere. Suddenly you could see that you could do edgy stuff, this and that. Later on, once I started performing for rooms that were filled, okay,
Yeah.
with people beyond just the younger open micers, I realized when there are older people in the audience, or there are kids in the audience, I was just not able to use any of that language. It just didn't come to me because I felt very uncomfortable.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So that's when I decided that I'll just write material that I can perform anywhere without thinking who's watching. Okay.
Sure.
So that was a guardrail that I had, that was very much self imposed. And later on, I realized that people, I was, people said that, oh, you're very clean comic, we can watch you with anybody and all that. That kind of came in after that. Rest, yeah, I stay away from politics. I stay away from political jokes. One, because that's not an area that I was even initially writing about. Okay,
Sure.
was not the area that really bothered me, or was, yes, with changing time you kind of say that it's better to stay away from it unless I really want to fight that battle. Today what happens is that if you open that ground, that then it opens on all fronts. It
Right.
will be everywhere on social media, so you got to be mentally ready to get 100 DMs about it. You'll get 5 interviews where you have to start talking about it. Then
Yeah.
I don't have the mental peace to pursue what I'm trying to pursue.
Mm. Right.
And that was
Right.
standard.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, maybe sometimes in that way, right? For your own
Yeah.
peace of mind, those
Yeah.
guardrails are
Hmm.
important. And yet, do they
Absolutely.
ever stifle or squash the innovation, or even the aspect of not necessarily finding new audiences, but just
Hmm.
even the material changing because the times are changing, and comedy has to evolve and meet some of those times. So I can see the importance of the guardrails, but do they
Hmm.
ever offer a limit on your work?
Limit, yes. I'll tell you where I felt its limits. I think in India, people still don't get satire completely.
Mm,
Okay. Uh,
yeah.
and it can sometimes really get into a dark space. And it's not for stand up, but long time back, I wanted to do a series of videos just with a friend of mine where we are two men who are judging women. Okay,
Yeah.
but it came from the point of view of purely satire, where you're showing that this is how men end up judging women. Okay,
Right.
but I know in India people will not get that half the time.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking, like, for the most part, right? Depending on how that lands or how it's
Huh.
elegantly set up,
Yeah,
it's a trap. I'm
yeah.
imagining.
Yeah, so it's better that you don't do it. Like, for example, in US, if you see, a lot of satire happens around, the black community, for example, where there are a lot
Sure.
of those sketches that you will see, whether those SNL sketches or whatever, where they're talking about the issues that happen with black community, but in a funny manner.
Sure.
So similarly, we have issues here, but I think it's still not time to touch those issues with satire in India.
And I think that because you're right, right? The SNL here is a good example that, like,
Yeah.
sort of in some ways and in some environments, anything
Hmm.
sort of goes.
Yeah.
And it's set up in a way, the environment is, it's assumed that
Uh,
satire is going to touch just about every part of
hmm.
society. But
Hmm.
again, the audience and society probably has to be ready for that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, when you think about some of your best shows and some of
Hmm.
your worst shows, right? When
Hmm.
you think back to how those have gone, Is there an anatomy to a good performance that transcends whether you're performing for a small audience of 20 or a large audience of several thousand,
Mhm.
whether it's in the US or the UK or India or Australia, anywhere? Is there an anatomy to how a show goes that is one that you try and follow based
Mhm.
upon kind of the experiences of having both good shows and bad shows in the past?
The anatomy is largely in comedy. The anatomy is largely around the setup of the room. Okay,
Mm, wow.
because
Okay.
you want the undivided attention of people. So typically, if it's a theater show, which is a ticketed show, with this, just that one light on you and you have a mic and everybody else is almost in complete dark, is the
Mm,
best way to perform, because
okay.
then there is no distraction, okay,
Yeah.
for the audience and for you. That's what we prefer as, as comedians. If you go to a comedy club or to a theater, okay, you'll see the setup is like that you can't see anywhere else. In America, or in the Western world, an additional advantage is that they also don't let you use your phone. If you watched Broadway, for example, you'll see that if
Right.
even if you just pull out your phone, someone will come in and tap your shoulder and say,
Right.
please keep it back.
Eject
Second
you.
time, you'll be
Yeah.
escorted out.
Right.
Yeah. So, in stand up, we can't drown out people's voices,
Yeah.
because we are just talking. Okay. It's not like a musical concert where people start talking to each other and it doesn't make a difference to the musician, because there's so much music, it's so loud. Here, even if there are 1,000 people in the audience, if two or three people start talking, I can hear them,
Mm,
because
yeah.
I am also just talking.
Right.
Then 10 people will start looking at them. So the anatomy of a good show is, basically the undivided attention that you can get of people, which
Yeah.
is ideally in a theater or in a comedy club.
I imagine that that probably also develops and cultivates
Yeah.
an enduring relationship, right? Because if there's
Yeah.
an intimacy that you have with an audience where they really felt that like you were
Mhm.
connecting with them, then those people are going to obviously want to see you again, and they're going to want
Yeah.
to hear your content. They're going to want to come back for more. You said recently, I read, audiences want more from comedians, and they want intelligent, well
Mhm.
crafted jokes. So, for someone who's a storyteller and a comic artist, how do you deliver on that consistently? And as you just mentioned, maintain that kind of captivity of an
Mhm.
audience, but particularly, especially as audiences, their choices and their attention spans are incredibly short-lived and fickle, and they may turn on a dime in that way. So how do you continue to maybe capture their attention and stay in a longer format, intelligent, well-crafted storytelling
Mhm.
weave that's often required to deliver on really good material?
So for that, basically, I have to work on myself. I have to ensure that I improve every time I write a new show. Okay.
Yeah.
So whenever I write a new show, I keep on asking myself, is there something new that I have done this time? For example, last show that I traveled to US was 95% was just pure observations. Okay. The setup was, I had like five or different sets where every set started with a premise and rest of it was observations which justified it. So the next show that I wrote, I decided that it has to be completely different from it. Okay.
Mm,
So the new show that I do now has moved from observations, completely away from observations, to storytelling. Okay. And it was not easy, because the earlier show, Hamare Zamane Mein, the show that I did in US, was getting such great response that it was very easy for me to fall into that trap and say that, let me just write another show with purely observations.
mm. Yeah.
Okay, because I know this is a very template driven format that I can write quickly. And I could have easily written another show with in that format. But there, if I had written another show like that, next year people would come in and they'll realize he sounds the same as he sounded last
Right.
year.
Right. I no, I was just going to say the audience probably is not loving
Yeah.
repetition in that way, right? They want something fresh.
Yeah. So you got to consciously keep on improving yourself so that the audience doesn't get tired of
Yeah.
you. Okay. And I don't get tired of me. Actually, that's the other part of it. Because like when I get on stage, I want to be excited myself as well.
Which is a hope that everyone has, right? I mean, no
Yeah.
matter what profession you're in, trying to
Uh-huh.
stave off getting tired of yourself is probably
Yeah.
the number one goal to prevent burnout.
You want to look forward to your next day, because now when I wrote my next show, which was completely different from the first one, okay, there's a certain sense of achievement for me as well, that I
Sure.
have, you know, I've just done like 5 stories in one show, from moving completely away from observation, and it's working. It took a lot of effort, honestly. Otherwise, if I wrote another show like that, I could have done it in a month and a half or 2 months.
Hmm.
This took me 5 months to write. The joy that you get out of it, it shows up on stage also, and it connects with the audience.
You mentioned knowing yourself well
Mhm.
and in a way growing.
Yeah.
Um, what if you had to unlearn about yourself or even undo
Mhm.
from your pre-comedian life
Mhm.
in order to really enjoy the success that you have now?
Actually, I've unlearned a lot from those days, like really woven myself out of the net that I was in during those days, over a period of time, because you realize how wrong you are in a lot of ways, or maybe the circumstances have changed. So that happens,
Sure.
as a comedian, because the variety of people that you meet. I was suddenly with a much younger set of people, because when I started I was 35 years old, but most of the comedians were in their early 20s. So that changed my perspective in life a lot,
Sure.
outside of comedy also, that how much things have changed, and you realize in a lot of your thinking how regressive you were. So that
Mm.
happened because of comedy.
Do you and because you now have realized those
Mhm.
regressions and for
Mhm.
that matter what you've had to undo or unlearn, do you live your life differently now?
Yeah, much differently. Much
Yeah.
differently. I think it shows up in the way we brought up our kids, the kind of support system and the kind of communication that we had with our kids. There, it made a big, big difference.
Yeah. Making you, I mean, yeah, do you feel like a different father or a different family member because of
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very different father.
Let me ask you this, if if aliens landed on the planet and and if they asked Chat GPT, I was thinking how to ask you this, and I've been just curious. If aliens land on the planet and they ask Chat GPT to create something in the style of Halwa
Hmm.
and with a typical Amit Tandon story and clean comedy, how would they be able to tell you apart from the AI version of you?
See, AI, I think, will know as much about me as is available online. Okay. But my experiences, I don't think AI will, know that much. It's there, because what happens is that, every time when you write a show, you are talking about new experiences that you had with your kids. Unless AI was listening through an Alexa, which was secretly placed at our home, they
Right.
would not know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, would do you think the technology is getting so good that if
Yeah.
it were to analyze an entire body of your work, including Halwa and some of the more
Mhm.
recent shows, do you think it would be able to predict your next secrets for that matter, or do they still stay secret with you? Right? Like, I mean, only you know what spontaneously is going to come next.
I hope only I know, but I don't know how much technology has advanced. Honestly, it keeps on surprising all of us. I think
And is that a threat for comedy or art? You think?
no, I don't think it's a threat to comedy. It probably would be a threat to comedy when it comes to written jokes. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as stand up as an art form is not just a written joke, but it's also the performance, the connection that you have when you are, talking on stage with the people,
Sure.
they find you likable or not. So all of that comes into play,
Yeah.
which you need a human form. Could probably still write the content, but the performance is an equally important part of it.
Yeah, and again with a human audience too. So
Yeah.
hopefully those two factors are not going to go away anytime soon. And you mentioned this idea of still there's some spontaneity, some secrets, and some ways that you continue to
Mhm.
grow. Is there a sweet spot then as a comic artist that integrates this idea of being content and satisfied with your work and the success you have, and then the innovative part and the drive and the ambition and the feeling that you need to continue to grow and scale
Mhm.
and the potential of getting
Mhm.
even bigger.
You keep on swaying between these two. It's like a pendulum.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes you're very happy with what you achieved, because sometimes I look at what I've done so far and I'm like, I was in a job, then I was running a business, nobody knew me, and now I'm doing, tours where I'm doing 2,000, 3,000 seaters in different cities of US and
yeah.
performed across. So I'm very happy with it. But then next day you are like, I have to write my next show.
Right. Back to the drawing board, right?
Yeah. So you got to keep this on all the time. So
Yeah.
that keeps on swinging it. There's never like a one single state that you have.
Do you find yourself hopefully in some steady state on that pendulum, or is it something you have to manage?
You got to manage it. I think if I don't get insecure about my content, then I'll not write new content.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm pretty happy with where I am. Because over the years, after writing so much material and so many specials, at the same time now I have that one part of me knows that I can write another show,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the stress that you always have, which I had
Mm.
for a long time, that people are finding this funny, they're really laughing a lot, can I write another set where which people will find as funny as I've written this?
And the answer is probably yes.
Probably yes. But it's going to get, like, it keeps on getting tougher, because you got to dig deeper in that well now, you know
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
your observations, of your experiences. You started with the surface in the first special, it's in
Right.
the second layer, third layer. Now you are already 150 feet deep.
Mm.
How
Yeah.
much more is there? Is
Yeah. There's a lot to dig there. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, it speaks to again confidence and trust and
Yeah.
the things that come with experience. Let me get you out of here on this. For those people who are certainly enjoying all of your work out there, there may be some who are discovering you for the very first time. And for those folks who might be actually seeing your work live or streaming online, and they're experiencing it for the first time, how do you hope they feel after experiencing some of your work?
I hope they remember a couple of jokes out of what I've said. You know, they find
Yeah.
something that they can tell somebody next day. That's
Mm,
that's all my expectation is, because that's how I try to write my material, to write jokes that survive beyond a day in your mind.
yeah. Well, surviving beyond a day, I'm sure surviving well beyond that, but lots of people, I'm sure, are telling each other great stories and great jokes that they heard from Amit Tandon. Amit, thank you so much for sharing
Thank
some
you,
time with us. And I hope we can visit with you again down the road.
thank you so much. See you.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.